Greetings, everyone. Happy Thursday. We are on session number 4. This is session 4 of the primal point. It's part 6 in front of us we're looking at, but this is session 4. So that means we've done this starting on Monday, and we're continuing until tomorrow. That will be July 21, 2023. This is made possible thanks to the Firm Foundation Academy and the Desert Rose Baha'i Institute. The Desert Rose Baha'i Institute has been supporting amazing initiatives such as this one, trying to spread knowledge and really share our understandings about the Baha'i faith, the history, and how we can better ourselves and our planet from using this knowledge, either whether it be the inspiration that we take away or ultimately the amazing steps that we can put into reality already from what we've seen. So with that being said, we're looking right now at this session. It's called The Turning Point, the Bab and the Babis. And we are again having started on July 17. We are on session number 4. All the previous 3 videos are posted online. You're welcome to view them as they've been streamed and recorded, as we will record this one. So you're welcome to jump in right here with us. Have no fear. We're going to go through and right where we left off, and you can always go back and watch what we did in the previous 3 days. Violetta, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so happy to have you. For all of you who don't know Violetta, who are just coming in, Violetta has produced content on the utteranceproject.com, which you can see one of the views in front of you right now on the screen. The utteranceproject.com is a place where you can connect with the Baha'i writings written in their original writing, spoken in the original in the Arabic or Persian as it was written, and you're able to see it translated in English to understand what's being said while you hear the words spoken aloud. So it's a very amazing project, the Utterance Project, putting the text to sound. And you're able to connect now with what Violetta has produced, which is the chronology of the Bab. And she's produced other chronologies. And again, Violetta has done amazing in putting imagery and also the substance that you may not see outside of this area. So we're inviting you to invite your friends and look at this and learn with us as we're discovering the Bab together. Thank you, Violetta, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So the first 5 parts of the primal point chronology deal with the childhood and adolescence of the Bab, his work as a merchant in Bushir, his pilgrimage of 11 months in Iraq, the months leading up to his declaration, and the declaration and the search and the successful search and their finding of the promised one of each of the 18 letters of the living. That was all extremely wonderful and exciting and positive, except for, of course, the passing of the Bab's father and the passing of his son Ahmad. But now we are entering the serious part of the chronology, because part 7 is the Bab's pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina, and part 6 and part 7 is his return to Shiraz after his pilgrimage. And in those 2 parts, now it's really good that we're doing them both together today, because in Mecca and Medina, the Bab proclaims his mission, his station, and his identity in the holiest places of Islam. And then he returns to Shiraz, and news travels, and he does the same thing in Shiraz. And that is the explosion. And that is what begins what we all know the most about the Bab's life, which is his successive imprisonments on the way to Azerbaijan, in Maku, in Chihrik, his examination in Tabriz, and his martyrdom in Tabriz. This is what causes all of that. And we're going to go into great detail on this, and we're just going to get started. So this is just the year 1844, 1845. This is just the life of the Bab from the age of 25 in 1844 to 26 in 1845. So he's 25, 26 during this entire part here. And the first thing that happens is that the Bab hears from Baha'u'llah. And why is that the first thing that happens? Because the Bab has sent and dispersed all the letters of the living, and he is planning to go and proclaim in Mecca and Medina. He hasn't really told anyone this except for maybe Qudus, who's going to accompany him, and Haji Mubarak, who's also going to accompany, and his wife probably. But no one else really knows what's about to happen. Only he does, and a handful of handpicked people. And the reason he's waiting for news from Baha'u'llah is because he sent Mullah Hussein, the first letter of the living, to find Baha'u'llah in Tehran, the secret buried in Tehran, and to give him the news of, he has a letter, he has a tablet from the Bab to Baha'u'llah. And he's waiting to hear of Baha'u'llah. He knows probably that Baha'u'llah is going to accept, but he is actually waiting to get that letter from Mullah Hussein confirming it. Now, the first thing we're actually going to look at is not the subject of this. It's actually one of his early revelations. It's called the Fis Suluk 2, On the Virtuous Journey 2. And sometime after the declaration, there is no date on this because we don't have a date. We just know the approximate time when it was revealed. Sometime after his declaration, the Bab revealed this epistle in honor of a man called Abu Tabil Ihusnayavi. And in this tablet, the Bab develops the idea of a spiritual journey and with questions of ethics and moral conducts. And now you see that the three periods of the Bab, which are the interpretive period, the philosophical period, and the legislative period, they are not necessarily clean cut with a scalpel, because you see that this is a work that's revealed in the interpretive period, which is interpretations of the hadiths and the Quran, but it also deals with questions of ethic and morals and conduct, and this is also philosophical. So we can't be too strict about these periods of revelation. In this tablet, the Bab expounds on one main principle, the mystic character of action that is inseparable from spiritual knowledge, and it is essential in contentment with the will of God. And he also studies various aspects of contentments and the reward of good deeds. And what's interesting is that the Bab elevates action as a process of attaining union with God in terms of your spiritual search, that action is inseparable from spiritual matters. There's a little more information on the website if you want to see that. Now, before the 10th of September, 1844, Mullah Ali Bastami had brought the message of the Bab to Karbala, and Sayyid Javad-e Karbilai, who is pictured here in his very old age, who was a faithful disciple of Sayyid Kazim, left for Shiraz. He became a follower as soon as he saw the Qayyum al-Asma, and he returned to Shiraz, where he had been several times during the Bab's childhood. And we remember telling stories about that in part one, how he was amazed by this child who was praying so wonderfully and who had such beautiful writing. And he comes as a believer. He returns as a follower of the Bab. When he arrives in Shiraz, he's accompanied by Sheikh Hassani Zunuzi, the Bab's amanuensis, but he's too ill to meet the Bab when he arrives. And he receives a message from the Bab saying that the Bab is going to come in person 2 hours after sunset. And he said, turn off all the lamps before I come. And that night, Haji Mubarak accompanies the Bab. He carries a lantern in front of the Bab. He's walking ahead of the Bab, and he's diverting attention from the Bab, who's following in the darkness behind him. And the Bab had instructed Haji Mubarak to extinguish the lantern as soon as they arrived to where Sayyid Javad-e Karbilai was sick in his room, probably in one of the mosques or in a place like that. So when the Bab enters Sayyid Javad-e Karbilai's dark room, he goes straight to his bedside, and Sayyid Javad is holding the hem of the Bab's robe in the dark and implores him, fulfill my desire, O beloved of my heart, and allow me to sacrifice myself for thee. for no one else except thee is able to confer upon me this favor. This is such a wonderful exchange. This is a man who saw the Bab when he was 5 years old, has known him for 20 years, and he returns as this devoted follower. The Bab replies, "O Shaykh, I too yearn to immolate myself upon the altar of sacrifice. It behooves us both to cling to the garment of the best beloved and seek from him the joy and glory of martyrdom in his path. Rest assured, I will, on your behalf, supplicate the Almighty to enable you to attain to his presence. Remember me on that day, a day such as the world has never seen before." Before leaving Sayyid Javad, the Bab gives him a gift to use for himself. And he refuses, but his refusal isn't accepted. And finally, he accepts the gift of the Bab and leaves the room. Now, also before the 10th of September, which is the date that the Bab leaves Shiraz, so it happened before this, the Bab hears about Baha'u'llah's conversion. And the image you have on the screen here is the teaching trip. This is an image that I borrowed from the other chronology on the life of Baha'u'llah. This is the map of the teaching trip that Baha'u'llah took from Tehran on the bottom left, up to 40 miles up to Yalrud, then to Takur, 7 miles further north, then to Sadat Abad, 25 more miles, then 25 more miles, no, that's 2.5 miles north to Darkala. So he proclaimed and proclaimed and proclaimed and proclaimed. And so when Mullah Hussein had completed the mission the Bab entrusted him with, he miraculously found Baha'u'llah in Tehran with no information on how to do this. He delivered through a mutual friend Bab's tablet to Baha'u'llah. And in return, the Bab conveyed through the same mutual friend a return gift for the Bab, a loaf of Russian sugar, a package of tea, and the expression of his appreciation and love. Mullah Hussein left Tehran for Khorasan and arrived in Mashhad, where he followed the rest of the Bab's detailed instructions. He wrote the Bab his letter, so he wrote a report of everything that had happened as a result of his teaching activities, gave the names of all the people who became Baha'i. He included a report on Baha'u'llah's hugely successful teaching journey in his home district of Noor, which he spontaneously undertook after embracing the faith, leaving his wife, Asiye Khanum, with a 2-month-old baby, Abdul Baha. He also followed the instruction of the Bab in how he sent the letter. He sent it first to Tabas in Khorasan, and it was forwarded to Yazd, and then it was sent to Shiraz. So when the Bab received the letter, it caused him indescribable joy. Qudus was the only person present with him when he opened it, and the Bab shared several passages of the letter from Mullah Hussein. After he received this wonderful news, the Bab was heard joyfully repeating how marvelous the events were that happened in the first summer of his declaration. In particular, the events that gladdened the Bab so much were Baha'u'llah's immediate response to his divine message. He was so bold and so efficient and so energetic, and he went and taught in Noor, his own home district, and had so much success and so many conversions, so many confirmations. It really cheered the Bab, and it reinforced his confidence in the ultimate victory of his cause. Even if he was felled in his tracks, the master hand of Baha'u'llah, guided by God, would be there to safeguard the faith. This is really important because he knows what's going to happen. And now he has this, not only did he know it, but now he has confirmation from Mullah Hussein of Baha'u'llah and how Baha'u'llah is going to, he is the light, he is the sun, that he is him whom God shall make manifest. So as soon as he receives the letter, he begins to make preparations for his pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. Now we're going to look at the preparations for his pilgrimage. And he leaves from Shiraz to go to Bushir because he's going to board a ship to go to Iraq from there. So on the 10th of September, 1844, the Bab leaves Shiraz for Bushir. And he leaves his wife and his mother, Khadija Begum and Fatime Begum, under the care and protection of his uncle, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali. He is accompanied by Qudus, the 18th letter of the living, but first in rank, and his loyal and trustworthy Haji Mubarak. And the three of them joined the company of other pilgrims leaving from Shiraz to go to Bushir, to board a ship, to complete their pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia. And this absence of several months is the first time the Bab and Khadija Begum are ever separated since their wedding. So on the 19th of September, 1844, 9 days after leaving her, the Bab writes his first letter to Khadija Begum. He wrote her and informed her that the weather is exceedingly hot, but God, the Lord of the world, is the protector. He informs Khadija Begum that the ship is going to be sailing soon, and he prays in his letter that God, the Lord of the world, will provide some protection by his grace. The Bab had not been able to say goodbye to his mother before leaving, so he asks very thoughtfully his wife, Khadija Begum, to give his mother his salutations and request her prayers. And he mentions that he was planning to write to Bombay, India, in order to purchase some goods. And he ends the letter with, God willing, that which is decreed will come to pass. Peace be upon thee, and the mercy of God and his blessings. Now, 2 days later, the Bab writes another letter to Khadija Begum. Oh no, sorry, friends. There's actually quite a nice, it's the manuscript letter of the Bab, but I didn't capture it, and so you can't see it. You are going to have to go to the chronology and see it. This is the actual letter the Bab wrote his wife on the 21st of September, 1844. And he begins his letter with the words, in the name of God, exalted is he, my sweet love, may God preserves thee. And he continues, God is my witness that since the time of our separation, such griefs encircled me as are beyond description. But since destiny is so all powerful, it is due to a fitting purpose that the separation occurred in this way. May God, in the name of the five holy souls, provide the means of my return as may be best. It is 2 days since I entered Bushir. The weather is intensely hot, but God will protect me. At any rate, it appears that in the very month the ship will sail. Gracious God shall protect us all. So the Bab stayed in Bushir for 2 weeks before sailing to Jadi. Jadi is the port in Saudi Arabia where all the pilgrims would arrive for Mecca and Medina. And he makes arrangements for his pilgrimage. So now we are looking at between the 2nd of October and about the 2nd of December, 1844, the sailing journey of the Bab to Saudi Arabia. From in that October, November, December, 2 months, the Bab and Qudus and Haji Mubarak are pilgrims, like other pilgrims, and they are on this boat, like this man. This photograph was taken it's from the Library of Congress. Sorry, you can't see the bottom of it. He is praying, doing his obligatory prayers on a ship bound to Mecca. So that's an image I chose to illustrate this boat, ship sailing to Mecca with the Bab, Qudus, and Haji Mubarak on board. The Bab boarded a very, very well-named Arab sailing boat, the Futu ar-Rasul, Victories of the Messenger. That's the name of the boat that brought the Bab to Mecca, the Victories of the Messenger, on the 2nd of October, 1844. He was with at least 4 people he knew among all the pilgrims who were on this ship. One of the people he knew was Muhammad Bakir Khan, a maternal uncle of the Shah of Persia, and his attendant, Shukrullah Khani Nuri, an official of the province of Fars. There were also 2 other Shirazis aboard who came with them to Bushir from Shiraz and boarded the same ship as them. Haji Habul Hassan, who embraced the faith of the Bab, and Sheikh Abu Hashim, who was the brother of the leader of the Friday prayers in Shiraz, a very important position. This man started out at the outset very jealous of the Bab and would become a real, inveterate, unforgivable enemy of the Bab. His name is Sheikh Abu Hashim. So during the journey, he became intensely arrogant and increasingly argumentative. He picked fight with other passengers. He targeted the Bab with insults. The Arab captain of the Futu al-Rasul, the victories of the messenger, Futu al-Rasul, the captain got to a point where he could no longer stand the sheikh and ordered him thrown out into the sea. The Bab, who he had insulted from the beginning of their sailing journey, pleaded for his life. And when he saw the sailors about to cast Sheikh Abu Hashim overboard, the Bab threw himself on the unpleasant man and requested the captain pardon him. The Arab captain was astonished at this turn of events because the Bab had been the victim of all these insults and his abuse. And the Bab made a fascinating reply. He said that since people who behave in the way that the sheikh had behaved only really hurt themselves, the rest of us should be tolerant and forgiving towards them. Now, this is really, really important because, you know, when we were talking before this session began, Joseph asked what were some of the social laws that the Bab brought that changed. And of course, we saw that he changed a lot of corrupt practices in Bushir, but this is maybe something that is an inkling. I mean, it's kind of eye-opening that the Bab would say, you know, people who are mean to you and rude to you and insult you and traumatize you, they're really only hurting themselves because they're really only hurting their souls and they're standing, you know, in heaven or not. And so why should we react to them? Why should we get mad back at them and then hurt ourselves, our own souls? Why shouldn't we just be tolerant and forgiving towards people who are really mean? It's like the reason why you turn the other cheek, I suppose, you know, because turning the other cheek always makes you look passive. But if you are not reacting to anger and hatred and bile and jealousy and abuse and insults and beatings and all that stuff, if you're not reacting because the person is only hurting themselves, there's something that's guiding your reaction. I think that's really interesting. So the conditions of the sea journey were not good. It was 2 months of very slow, very stormy, unsteady sailing. And despite these conditions and the complete lack of comfort, the Bab never missed a single one of his obligatory prayer and his meditations on top of his prayers. He was oblivious of the storms that raged around him, the lack of drinking water, the seasickness, the panic of the other pilgrims. He was continually absorbed in revealing prayers and tablets and dictating them to Qudus, and both of them were serene amidst the chaos. At one point during the journey, the scarcity of water on board the ship was so severe that the Bab stated in a tablet, "For days we suffered from the scarcity of water. I had to content myself with the juice of a sweet lemon." During this journey, the Bab was carefully preparing Qudus for his great destiny, which would unfold far away from the Bab. The Bab was the epitome of cleanliness and courtesy, and he would often counsel, never sadden anyone, no matter whom, for no matter what. The 2-month sea journey confronted the Bab with very wealthy notables on the boat who was spending large amounts of money, but would not splurge pennies for a glass of water for a fellow traveler. And the Bayan, the Bab would later reveal, the saddest thing I saw on my pilgrimage to Mecca was the constant disputes of the pilgrims between themselves, disputes which took away the moral benefit of the pilgrimage. I think that's a very deep and subtle point. The Bab didn't utter a single complaint during the journey, and he kept a very unpleasant memory of the journey. And a few weeks later, in his Epistle Between Two Shrines, which we're going to look at very soon, he stated, "Know that the sea voyages are hard. We do not favor them for the faithful. Travel by land." I think an explanation for this would be that it was very undignified. You have here a picture that was taken 56 years later, sometime between 1900 and 1920. It's a Meccan pilgrims on the deck of a ship, and obviously they're leaving from Egypt, but this is the same type of ship, although less modern, that the Bab was on. So that's the reason that it's there. So on the 14th of October, 1844, the ship anchored in Muscat, Oman. This is a picture of Muscat about a half century later in the 1900s. The journey from the pilgrim for the Persian Gulf to from Bushir to Muscat lasted 12 days. So the Bab arrived in Muscat on the 14th of October, 1844, and was anchored for several days, during which he attempted to teach and convert people to the Baha'i faith without success. And he bore witness to the difficulties he encountered in Muscat in a tablet that is translated in part by A.L.M. Nicolas and was translated in English from the French. Say, we have not seen in Muscat men of the book willing to help him, a person the Bab taught, because they are lost in ignorance. And the same was true of all these voyagers on the boat, with the exception of one who believed in our verses and became one of those who fear God. So he writes a letter to his mother on the 21st of November, a month later, in Mecca, Yemen. And this is a picture of Mecca in the early 20th century. This Mecca in Yemen was a port on the way to Jeddah. And the Bab wrote a long and deeply touching letter to his mother, in which he sends his love to his wife, asks his mother to kiss the eyes of the children of the family, and mentions Haji Mubarak in his letter. It's very touching to notice that the Bab mentions previous letters written to his mother from Bushir and from Muscat, Oman, where he was when he tried to teach, as well as a letter to Khadija Begum, which he also sent to from the same place, Mecca, Yemen. And this indicates that he's in constant communication with these two extraordinary women who were the pillars of his life, really. The Bab and Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha married women who were incredibly important in their lives, very, very strong women, very spiritual women. Sometimes they were even mentioned in prophecy, like the mother of Baha'u'llah was mentioned in the Ancient Testament. So these women are very special, and their parents were also incredible, so it's really very interesting that we know so much about the parents and the wives and the children, the faithful children of the central figures. This is a quote from actually it's very, very, very long. I just want to give you I'm going to read you the beginning, and the rest you can read on the because I really want to get to Mecca. This is a letter written from the port of Mecca to the Honorable Mother. May God, the Most Exalted, keep her safe. She is most certainly eager to know about the well-being of her son. A letter was sent from Bushir. See, and then the rest of the letter, he mentions what I summarized at the top. The letters from Mecca, the letters from Bushir, the letters from Muscat. One detail that's actually kind of interesting is that at the time, it was not allowed, not proper, and not done to write a letter directly to a woman. So the Bab's letter to his wife and mother are addressed to Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, Fatima Begum's brother who lived in Bushir, and then he would forward the letter to his sister in Shiraz. So there's a really sweet story about a letter being misplaced or not sent on time. Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad received letters from the Bab, and just like a little map of Muscat, Mocha, Bushir, Mecca, Medina, and Jadi, the port, just to give you a little idea of how they relate to each other around the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea and the Red Sea, because he traveled to 3 bodies of water: Persian Gulf, Arab Sea, and the Red Sea. Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, he writes profusely to the Bab, and he says he apologizes for his mistake, and he apologizes to the mother and the wife for misplacing the letter, and it's just really long. It's very, very sweet, and yeah, but it's quite long. I just want to get to Mecca because we have a whole nother part to do today. So apologies if I'm summarizing some parts. So the Bab arrives in Mecca early December 1844, and we're going to start this section out with a revelation that occurred sometime between January 1844 and January 1845. So we don't know exactly when this happened, and this is something that you will become used to as the chronology goes on, because I have specific dates for only very few things: the tablets, utterances, epistles, books, commentaries. Only very few of them are very, very exactly dated. A lot of them, we know the range because we know they were revealed before another writing or before an event and after an event. So we know that this one was revealed after the Bab was revealed sometime between when the Bab began pilgrimage and returned to Iran. So that's why we know it was revealed within that year. And in the rest of these series, sometimes you'll see that they have a range of dates because they were begun in one date and they were completed on another date. And sometimes that span is several years, like with the Bayan. It wasn't revealed in one go. So this commentary on the Surah of the Cow, Tafsir-i Suri-i Bakari 1, because there are two of them. This is just an illumination of like the opening of this surah in the Quran. Yeah, so I'm just going to keep it there. So this surah is one of the Bab's most major works, and it consists of two major parts. Part one, the Tafsir 1, Ibarki 1, is the interpretation of the first juz, a unit meaning 1/30th of the Quran, running through verse 141 of the Surah of the Cow. This commentary was begun on the night of Sayyid Kazim's passing and was completed at the beginning of 1845. So see, this is one of these surahs that are completed in a long period of time. And both dates, beginning and end, are mentioned by the Bab in the commentary itself. And then there's a part two, that is the commentary on the Surah of the Cow 2, which is a commentary on two verses of the Surah of the Cow. And it is a continuous interpretation, which the Bab did not divide in chapters, like he did with the Qayyum al-Asma, which is 111 chapters. But, and the subject is the Surah of the Cow, the second chapter of the Quran, and the longest at 268 verses and over 6,000 words. So now the Bab is on a route to Mecca between the 2nd and the 12th of December, 1844. These are caravans. Later in, of course, all the photographs you're going to see in black and white are about 50 years after the Bab. When they are of the time of the Bab, I will mention it definitely. So when the Bab arrived in Jadi, he and his companions donned the ihram, the garb of a pilgrim. They mounted a camel and they headed for Mecca. Qudus walked in front of the camel, holding the camel's bridle, very joyfully and prayerfully, attending to the needs of the Bab and the safety of the Bab, and indifferent to his own tiredness. One day at dawn, during their journey, they broke near a well so that the Bab could do his ablutions and offer his morning prayer. And Haji Mubarak unpacked the loads from the backs of the camels and prepared to settle down. Just as the Bab began to pray, a Bedouin appeared as swift as lightning, snatched the saddlebag filled with many of the Bab's tablets and ran away with them. Haji Mubarak began to chase the thief, hoping to catch him and get the Bab's precious satchel, but the Bab motioned him to stop. After he had completed his prayers, the Bab showered affection and kindness on Haji Mubarak, explaining to him that God would reward him and why he had stopped the pursuit, explaining affectionately that God had intended for his tablets to be disseminated in this mysterious manner. So between the 12th of December, 1844 and the 12th of February, 1845, which is the time that the Bab is in Mecca, the Bab reveals the Safiye Razaviye, the Epistle of Reza. This epistle is very long, and it consists of 14 sermons gathered under the title Epistle to Reza. Okay, so it's like a compilation. It's like gleanings, kind of. No, it's not like gleanings. It's like Tabernacle of Unity, or like Days of Remembrance. Okay, Days of Remembrance is a book made of 35, I think, entire tablets, like the Lahi Arziba and like the tablet of the immortal youth and so many tablets that are entirely in there. And so this Epistle to Reza is exactly like Days of Remembrance. It's 14 full sermons inside this book. And there are some sermons that we're going to look at in great detail at the date that they were revealed. Like, for example, the Khutbiyye Zikriyye, the Sermon of Remembrance, was revealed in January 1846, and we're going to look at that in January 1846, at that point in the chronology. And then the second sermon, the Kitab al-Fihrist, is the Book of the Index, and that was on the 21st of June, 1845. We're going to look at that separately. So what's really interesting, there's one of them, the 11th sermon is called Khutbiyye Jidda, the Sermon of Jidda. The Bab lists the names of the works that the Bedouin stole from his satchel at the well when he was praying. When I'm telling you the Bab's is exact, I'm telling you the Bab is exact. Two of the sermons in this Sermon to Reza are lists and dates of tablets he revealed. That's why we know that one of them was revealed in January 1846. One of them was revealed on the 21st of June, 1845, because he dated some of them. So now the actual pilgrimage of the Bab to Mecca between the 12th and the 24th of December. Now, before we go into detail, this is the Mecca with the black stone at the center. This is the Masjid al-Haram, the inviolable mosque, the largest mosque in the world, and one of the two oldest mosques in the entire world. It's home of the Kaaba, the black stone you see in the middle, where it's the Qibla for the Muslims. That's where they turn to pray. We turn to the Shrine of Baha'u'llah, they turn to the Kaaba. Now, although the Prophet Muhammad is born in Medina, Mecca is the holiest city of Islam because it is widely considered to be the cradle of Islam. So, this mosque, the inviolable mosque, Masjid al-Haram, was believed by Muslims to have been built by Abraham and Ishmael as the first house of worship in human history. And the Kaaba remained a holy site for millennia, but at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, idols were worshipped on the grounds. And the Prophet Muhammad struck down 360 idols and restored the Kaaba to its rightful place, and it became the direction of prayer for all Muslims. It is also from the Kaaba, this black stone, that the Prophet Muhammad left on his night journey. If you want to know more about that, there's a link in the chronology for night journey, the Wikipedia page to it. Very fascinating. I encourage you to read about that. So this you see is a 1910 photograph of the Kaaba crowded with pilgrims. On the 19th of December, 1844, the Bab spent the day of Arafat, the second day of his pilgrimage, and the day preceding the Islamic holy festival of Eid al-Adha, in his room in prayer and meditation. On the 20th of December, 1844, the next day, the first day of this holy festival, the Bab offered his feast day prayer and purchased 19 lambs of the finest breed. He offered 9 in sacrifice in his name, 7 in the name of Qudus, and 3 in the name of Haji Mubarak. The Bab did not partake of the feast, and he distributed it among the poor in the neighborhood. Because of the oppressive heat, pilgrims wore that ihram, the light, loose-fitting tunics, instead of the traditional ihram, the pilgrim's attire. The Bab refused to change. He did not wear the light, loose-fitting tunics. He kept the ihram and his turban and his cloak as a mark of respect. Like I tell you, this is one of the most distinctive signs of the Bab, is his courtesy, and especially his devoutness and his sense of the sacred with anything having to do with God or God's manifestations. And he performed all the rites of pilgrimage dressed in his regular attire, circumambulating the Kaaba. Among one of the most distinguished pilgrims that year was a man named Sayyid Jafar-i-Kashfi, the father of Wahid. Wahid, whose name before he became a Babi was Sayyid Yahya, was one of the most erudite sons of Persia. And he would become one of the Bab's most distinguished followers. Not a letter of the living, because he didn't declare in the first 40 days. But very important. And the story of Wahid is covered in the next part and is going to be covered in detail. On the 24th of December, 1844, the Bab completed the rites of pilgrimage, and the roofs of the adjoining houses were swarming with 100,000 pilgrims. The Bab stood against the structure, which you see here very close up. This photograph is also from the Library of Congress. It's a close-up of a man touching it, and I chose this picture specifically because the Bab touches it. So this is a spiritual homage to the scene that is taking place right now before our eyes. The Bab is 100,000 people around him on the roofs, swarming with pilgrims. He takes the ring of the door of the Kaaba in his hands and repeats 3 times in a clear voice, I am that Qa'im whose advent you have been awaiting. I am that Qa'im whose advent you've been awaiting. I am that Qa'im whose advent you have been awaiting. The crowd fell silent. The Qa'im, the promised one of Islam, had been awaited for over 1,000 years and yearned for by 40 generations of Muslims, and had just been announced at the holiest spot in all of Islam. News of the Sayyid's claims started spreading and would soon arrive in Shiraz. This is another photograph of the Kaaba from a little farther away. Another stunning, stunning photograph. This one is from Wikimedia Commons. That same day, this is the last day of his pilgrimage, the Bab meets the haughty Mirza Muhti-i Kirmani, one of the most outstanding exponents of Shaykhi school. And in the encounter, the Bab declares his mission to the almost the top of the Shaykhi school from Sheikh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazim, and tells them he is the one promised by Sayyid Kazim and Sheikh Ahmad. He is the Qa'im, he is the promised one of Islam. Mirza Muhiti Kirmani was facing the black stone when the Bab approached him, took his hands in his and said, "O Muhit, you regard yourself as one of the most outstanding figures of the Shaykhi community and a distinguished exponent of its teachings. In your heart, you even claim to be one of the direct successors and rightful inheritors of those twin holy lights, those stars that have heralded the morn of divine guidance. Behold, we are now standing within this most sacred shrine. Within its hallowed precincts, he whose spirit dwells in this place can cause truth immediately to be known and distinguished from falsehood and righteousness from error. Verily, I declare, none besides me in this day, whether in the east or in the west, can claim to be the gate that leads men to the knowledge of God. My proof is none other than that proof whereby the truth of the Prophet Muhammad was established. Ask me whatsoever you please. Now, at this very moment, I pledge myself to reveal such verses as can demonstrate the truth of my mission. You must choose either to submit yourself unreservedly to my cause or repudiate it entirely. Friends, remember that doing this, he is holding Muhit's hands in his hand. He's holding the man's hand. You have no other alternative. If you choose to reject my message, I will not let go of your hand until you pledge your word to declare publicly your repudiation of the truth I have proclaimed. Thus shall he who speaks the truth be made known, and he that speaks falsely shall be condemned to eternal misery and shame. Then shall the way of the truth be revealed and made manifest to all men. You can imagine they're standing in front of this holiest spot of Islam, and the words the Bab has just spoken. And he's just very distressed because the Bab is exceedingly courteous, exceedingly polite, but he is not shy. He is confident. He is a manifestation of God, and he speaks courteously, but firmly and with majesty and force. So the man is scared. He's confused. He's distressed, probably embarrassed because other people must have heard what the Bab was saying. So what does he do? He swears fealty to the Bab, and he swears he's going to arise for the triumph of the cause. And he says, if I be insincere in what I declare, if in my heart I should disbelieve what my lips proclaim. I'm not going to keep quoting him. This man is just full of air, hot air. The Bab listened attentively to his words, but he harbored absolutely no illusion that this man's weakness of character would not allow him to proclaim the Bab as the promised one of the Shaykhi school, the promised one of Islam, the one that Prophet Muhammad had announced, the one that Sheikh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazim had prepared people for. So the Bab does offer to this man, who's a very weak-charactered man, offers to answer any of his questions before his departure from Medina as conclusive proof of his truth. So this faithless man, he gives his questions to the Bab, and he leaves in a hurry, probably runs a little bit or walks very fast. I have a little treat for you here. On that same day, it was a very busy day for the Bab. Excuse me, it was a very, very busy day for the Bab because it's the last day of his pilgrimage. He says 3 times, I am the promised one that you have waited for, to 100,000 people, and rumors start spreading. He proclaims his message to the head of the Shaykhi school, almost kind of the head of the Shaykhi school. And he invites the Sheriff of Mecca to believe in him. And friends, this is the Sheriff of Mecca. I found a picture of him. How cool is that? This is the man that the Bab wrote to. It even says on the bottom, Sheriff of Mecca, but you can't see it. It's a drawing from 1849, 5 years after he met the Bab. And it was drawn by a man named Francis William Lynch, who was a commander. His name is Muhammad ibn Abdul Muin ibn ibn Aoun. He was the sheriff and the emir of Mecca from 1827 to 1851 and from 1856 to 1858. And he was appointed to the emirate to be the emir and the sheriff of Mecca by Muhammad Ali Pasha, the ruler of Egypt. So this extremely significant event, which the Shoghi Effendi, the historian of the Baha'i faith, says is the second most significant event to take place during his pilgrimage, is when he addressed the Sheriff of Mecca a letter along with selections of his writings that he himself chose, which Qudus hand-delivered. In his tablet to the Sheriff of Mecca, the Bab sets forth clearly and unmistakably the distinguishing, you see how organized the Bab is. He sets forth clearly and unmistakably the distinguishing features of his mission and invites the Sheriff of Mecca to arise and embrace the truth of his new revelation. So he's just told, everybody in Mecca basically that he is the Qa'im. Then he's told the leader of the Shaykhi school that he's the Qa'im. And now he's told the Sheriff of Mecca, the holiest place in Islam, that he is the promised one. He's invited everyone to join the faith. And then now 6 years later in 1850, shortly after the martyrdom of the Bab, this same Sheriff of Mecca, which is still the Sheriff of Mecca at that time, he recounts this episode of him receiving a tablet from the Bab to a pilgrim called Haji Niyazi Baghdadi. So apparently the Sheriff recalls that the Bab came to him the next day after he had sent him the tablet and the selections of his writings. And he had, in the tablet, he had told him the distinguishing features of his mission. And he asked the Sheriff if he had any response to his offer. And I'm going to read this, even though it's long, because it's really special, because it's an image of the Bab seen through the eyes of the Sheriff of Mecca. So the most uber Muslim person probably in the world. I think it's kind of interesting how non-Baha'is, non-Babis saw the Bab. I'm kind of fascinated by that. I recollect that in the year 1844, during the season of pilgrimage, a youth came to visit me. He presented to me a sealed book, which I readily accepted, but was much too occupied at the time to read. A few days later, I met again that same youth who asked me whether if I had any reply to make to his offer. The pressure of work had again detained me from even considering the contents of that book. I was therefore unable to give him a satisfactory reply. When the season of pilgrimage was over, one day, as I was sorting my letters, my eyes fell accidentally upon that book. I opened it and found, in its introductory pages, a moving and exquisitely written homily, which was followed by verses, the tone and language of which bore a striking resemblance to the Quran. Guess what? Because God revealed both of them. That's why they resemble the Quran, because they were revealed by God. All that I had gathered from the perusal of this book was that among the people of Persia, a man of the seed of Fatimeh, see again Fatimeh, and descendant of the family of Hashim, had raised a new call and was announcing to all people the appearance of the promised Qa'im. See, but he's mistaken because he thinks that the Bab was announcing someone else's arrival, but he didn't realize that the Bab was announcing that he was the Qa'im. So he didn't really read very carefully. I remained, however, ignorant of the name of the author of that book, nor was I informed of the circumstances attending that call. So then, of course, the pilgrim tells this Sheriff, he explains to him the station of the Bab, that was actually, the Bab was the promised one and the Bab was martyred, and this is how he was martyred. And the breadth of his revelation and the scope of his influence and the circumstances of his martyrdom. And the Sheriff explains, the malediction of God be upon these evil people, he exclaimed, a people who in days past treated in the same manner our holy and illustrious ancestors. So, he was incensed by how badly the Bab was treated. And so maybe he understood something in the end. So after Mecca, the Bab went to Medina. And then in between Mecca and Medina is this famous Sahfiye Ibain al-Hamarain, the epistle between two shrines that I've been talking to you about so much because I love this epistle so much. I was so excited that the Bab revealed an epistle on a camel, he's on a camel in between Mecca and Medina, but he still revealed this epistle and he called it the epistle between two shrines. It's so exciting. So the Bab left Mecca on the 7th of January, 1845, and faithful to his promise, he revealed responses to Mirza Muhit-i-Kirmani and Sayyid Ali Kirmani's questions 3 days later on his way from Mecca to Medina in this tablet, which I'm not going to repeat the name because I butchered it and I don't want to embarrass myself again. The introduction of this epistle has the epistle is divided in two sort of. There is an introduction and there are 7 chapters. And in these, the Bab affirms his station, answers various questions having to do with talismanic symbols. So you can kind of see the kind of person that this guy was at the stone when the Bab held his hand, he was like the top of the shaky people. All he wanted to know was about talismans, Like, some people, they had like a really interesting questions, like the maternal uncle of the Bab who asked these 4 questions to Baha'u'llah. And lo and behold, we get the Kitabi Ikan. And then you have these people and they ask him, manifestation of God, I want to know about these talismans. I want to know about these symbols. Bab explains. He also included prayers and tablets of visitations associated with pilgrimage. Mom, if I don't talk fast, I'm not going to get to say what I want to say. People can listen again later. It's just going to be on the internet, mommy. Okay, mommy? I'm going to talk fast, mommy. All right. So, and so one of the tablets of visitations that the Bab revealed in this epistle is associated with the pilgrimage to the shrine of the Imam Hussein, which is in Karbala, which, remember how much the Bab cried when he was in Karbala and how much his own tablets of visitation in Karbala made the other pilgrims stop and listen and just be. Now he is a manifestation of God. He was always a manifestation of God, but now he's declared his mission. Now he's actually putting these tablets of visitations that he recited, maybe not exactly the same, but he's putting them down on paper. You see how interesting that is? So you have a manifestation of God who is 21 years old in Karbala, and he's like saying these tablets of visitation that people are just astounded at how beautiful they are. 4 years later, he is now receiving revelation from God so he can reveal these things, and they can now be things that we can pray with now. Because when he was pilgrimage with the age of 21, he wasn't receiving the revelation from God. So there's nothing left of those prayers. Do you see how you see revelation, what revelation is? It's that process by which these words of a manifestation of God now come into our prayer books. And everything else they said doesn't. And the majority of their life doesn't make it into our prayer book. So what we have is incredibly sacred and incredibly precious because everything else is lost. All we have is this. Unless we find that satchel that Bedouin stole. So the Bab arrives in Medina, and I just want to I didn't know anything about Mecca and Medina. So these little significance of Mecca and significance of Medina, they're little notes to myself because I didn't know this. So just want to do a little introduction to Medina. So Medina is the second holiest city in Islam, and was like more than Mecca, actually. Mecca was the birthplace of Muslim culture and civilization, but Medina was the cradle of Muslim culture and civilization. The importance of Medina in Islam, and the reason that it is the second city for pilgrims to visit, is because of this one mosque, Al-Masjid Al-Nabawi, the Prophet's mosque, a mosque of exceptional significance to Muslims because it was not only built by the Prophet Muhammad, blessed be his name, but it is also where the Prophet Muhammad is laid to rest. So important. Can you imagine the emotion of the Bab to visit this place for the first time where his grandfather is buried? Of course, 40 generations back, right? But his father's father multiplied by 40 all the way to Khadija Begum and Fatima, his daughter, and then the line of the Bab. But he's descended. He's there on pilgrimage, not with a light tunic, but it was his regular clothes and his green turban, the green turban of his Sayyid, who is the descendant of the Holy Prophet buried in this mosque. So the Bab is on pilgrimage in Mecca between the 16th of January and the 12th of February, 1845. And this is a passage from the Dawnbreakers. So, when I'm going to be telling you things that the Bab is thinking, and I love the Dawnbreakers that they did that. And I'm not claiming to know what the Bab thought, but because Nabil put it in, and because my dearly, wonderfully beloved, revered, adored Shoghi Effendi translated it into English, I'm going to tell you what was in the Bab's mind. So as the Bab approached the holy city of Medina, he called to mind the stirring events of Islamic history that had immortalized it, and the circumstances of the life and death of the Prophet Muhammad within its walls. It was as if he could see these immortal events reenacted before his eyes as he approached the holy tomb, enshrining the Prophet Muhammad's sacred dust. In approaching Medina, the Bab also remembered Sheikh Ahmad-i-Ahsai, the herald of his own dispensation, who, after handing over his school in Karbala to Sayyid Kazim, had made the choice to spend of what remained of his earthly life in Medina, in the vicinity of this holiest of holy shrines. He was buried in the Janat al-Baqi, the oldest and very first Islamic cemetery of Medina. Nabil states that the Bab also had visions of Islamic holy men, pioneers, martyrs of the faith who had not fallen in battle and sealed with their blood the triumph of Islam 13 centuries ago. With the Bab's arrival in Medina, it was as if their sacred dust came alive under his blessed footsteps, their spirit reanimated by his presence, as if their very souls had risen with his approach, and they were hurrying towards him, welcoming him to the holy city. Guys, this is amazing. This is like a description of the concourse on high, welcoming the Bab, living manifestation of God, to the resting place of his ancestor, another manifestation of God. No wonder that the entire concourse on high and the heroes and martyrs of Islam who sealed with their blood the faith of Islam and all of the holy souls and everybody is welcoming the Bab. Can you imagine? Baha'u'llah never went to Mecca. But can you imagine the welcome Baha'u'llah would have had? It's the most amazing thing ever. That's why I kept this almost exactly the way that Nabil wrote it, because I just think this is one of the most exciting things ever. This is also great. Nabil says, the Bab's invincible spirit replied to these visions. Fear not. I am come into this world to bear witness to the glory of sacrifice. You are aware of the intensity of my longing. You realize the degree of my renunciation. Nay, beseech the Lord your God to hasten the hour of my martyrdom. Okay? Martyrdom. So, any doubt that the Bab knew what was going to happen to him can just be laid to rest with this. And to accept my sacrifice. Rejoice, for both I and Qudus will be slain on the altar of our devotion to the King of Glory. Baha'u'llah is called the King of Glory. The blood which we are destined to shed in his path will water and revive the garden of our immortal felicity. The drops of this consecrated blood will be the seed out of which will arise the mighty tree of God. This is also the Baha'i faith. The tree is like the covenant. The tree that will gather beneath its all-embracing shadow the peoples and kindreds of the earth. Grieve not, therefore, if I depart from this land, for I am hastening to fulfill my destiny. One of the most important things Baha'u'llah ever wrote about the Bab was, this actually not so much wrote, but the Bab was talking to Haji Mirza Haidar Ali, who I'm going to be covering in 2 Sundays in September, in 2 parts, his incredible life. He got to hear so many things from Baha'u'llah's mouth himself. And the Baha'u'llah told Haji Mirza Haidar Ali, if you look at the life of the Bab, his actions, his revelation, his words, his martyrdom, you cannot believe anything other than that is the hand of God guiding that life. Every single thing that happened in the life of the Bab was meant to happen and was willed to happen by God. So it's really unbelievable. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit fast here. This is the end of the pilgrimage. The Kitabur Ruh is a book of the spirit. And, what happened? This was revealed in on the ship. And to give you an idea of this, I made what I think is a very beautiful collage of the 4 bodies of water in order that were sailed by the Bab on his return to Bashir, emphasizing the contact with the elements that the Bab had while he was revealing this book of the Spirit in the open seas. So in the top left is the Red Sea. In the top right is the Gulf of Aden. In the bottom is the Arabian Sea on the right, and on the left, the Persian Gulf. If you want to know about the Kitab al-Ri, you can go to the chronology. The Bab returns to Bushir after his pilgrimage and sends Qudus on a mission to Shiraz to deliver a tablet to his uncle Haji Mirza Haidar Ali, and says to him, "The days of our companionship with me are drawing to a close. The hour of separation has struck." A separation which no reunion will follow, except in the kingdom of God, in the presence of the King of Glory. Anyway, all right. So, in Bushir, on the 21st of June, 1845, the Bab reveals the Book of the Index. And I'm going to not spend too much time on this because I want you to read the whole thing that I wrote. In the chronology. It's very, very long. This is really it's such an amazing book. And please, everybody, if you do not own Gate of the Heart, Understanding the Writings of the Bab by Nader Saidi, buy it now on Amazon and have it delivered in 24 hours. It's amazing. This is the second sermon in the book of 14 sermons that the Bab began revealing in Mecca. Always extremely complicated. The Book of the Index is significant because it is one of 2 listings that the Bab himself made of his own revealed writings. And the other one is the one that we're going to see in the next part, and it's the Qutbiyya-i-Zikriyyah. And so it's, for me, I'm a chronology girl. I love chronologies. I love looking at things in chronological order because I feel like I understand things better. So the fact that the Bab made 2 chronological lists of his writings, I just think is like the best thing in the entire world. I just think that's so amazing. One of the interesting aspects of this book, before I move on to the next part, is that it is a turning point in the Bab's mission. When the Bab draws up the list of his revelation up to this point, the Bab's intent is to withdraw from everyone. And he's almost, I think he identifies Mullah Hussein as the one who everybody should ask their questions to. And now the Bab wanted to withdraw because the proclamation had not gone well. And he was, manifestations of God are human. They have like a human exterior, and they feel sad when their wives die, and they feel sad when their children die, and they feel sad when they are opposed and when people break the covenant, So he was feeling sad. And he said that he was going to put a stop to revelation for 5 years, starting on the 21st of June, 1845. 5 years and 19 days from the 21st of June, 1845 was when the Bab was martyred. So one of the most important things that are happening here in the end of this period here is that the Bab sends a message to Shiraz, to Mullah Sadiqi Muqaddas, who is a Sheikhi and who's a Babi now, and who is with Qudus. And he leads the congregational. He goes to a mosque and leads the congregational prayer and changes the congregational prayer, and according to the specific instructions of the Bab. And he says, adds a verse, and the verse is, "I bear witness that he whose name is Ali Qabli Muhammad, Ali preceding Muhammad, the Bab, is the servant of Baqiyatullah, the remnant of God, Baha'u'llah." I'm just going to leave that there. The storm breaks immediately. Sheikh Abu Hashim, the really mean guy who was on the ship and who was almost thrown overboard because he was such a pest. And he, by the way, just in passing, the Bab saved his life. Okay. But anyway, now he wants blood, literally. And the Bab is in Bushir. So he's on Persian land and he's on his way to Shiraz. So this is what we're going to be looking at right now, is the story of the escort of the Bab to Shiraz. So now the Bab is alone with Haji Mubarak because he sent away Qudus to Shiraz, and he's going to be there when they change that verse in the prayer. He's going to be tortured very, very badly. There is the arrest of Qudus and Muqaddas and Mullah Ali Akbar, which when they added this verse to prayer, happened at a point when Shiraz had lived for 1 year in total chaos. For 1 year since the Bab had been gone on pilgrimage, suddenly he left Shiraz and suddenly there's anarchy, crimes, thieving, public disturbance. And then he sends instructions to add a verse to the call of prayer, and that just makes the chaos well. And Hussein Khan, who is the governor, he discovers the identity of the Bab, realizes the Bab has been Bushir, back from pilgrimage. He orders his arrest and sends mounted officers to arrest him and bring him back to Shiraz. In the meantime, the Bab, 7 days after writing the book of the Index, he had left Bushir, and 2 days later, he had reached Dalaki, so on the 30th of June, 1845. And Dalaki is significant because it is where the mounted escort leaves from Shiraz, the Bab leaves from Bushir, and they meet in Dalaki. They find him in Dalaki. So the Bab encounters the guard, and the Bab actually initiated the contact. He told Haji Mubarak, go quickly, ask the soldiers where they're going and what their mission is. Of course, he already knows they're there for him, but he's just, this is not a place where you just present your omniscience, you just pretend like you don't know, just to get the conversation started. So Haji Mubarak gets the conversation started. They are super rude to him. They dismiss him and tell him just to go away. And they say to him, what we're doing and where we are going is none of your business, black man. Haji Mubarak returns to the Bab saying, the horsemen refused to say what their mission is. I would have told them but anyway, they're super rude and racist. Again, the Bab sends Haji Mubarak back, bearing a simple message. Go and tell them to come to me. Haji Mubarak goes to the soldiers and conveys the Bab's words. My master asked that you should be so kind as to come so that we can make your acquaintance. Now, you have to remember, this is really important. Haji Mubarak is the one who was asked to teach the Bab courtesy and manners after the Bab's father died. So do you see how Haji Mubarak is also incredibly courteous in the same style as the Bab of courtesy? My master asked, he said, go and tell them to come to me. And Haji Mubarak says, my master asked that you should be so kind as to come so that we can make your acquaintance. Now, the other thing is that the Bab and Haji Mubarak have been together their whole lives. So the Bab knows that when he tells Haji Mubarak to say, go and tell them to come to me, the Haji Mubarak is not going to go and see these racist, rude guards and say, hey, go and come to my master. He knows Haji Mubarak. He knows Haji Mubarak is going to say it in the highest Persian, the most polite possible way. So anyway, Aslan Khan, the older and wiser soldier, accompanies Haji Mubarak to rejoin the Bab. But when the Bab asks him about their mission and destination, they don't want to answer really. So they just kind of go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then finally, the Bab says, no reason to conceal your mission. Your mission is to take the Sidi Bab to Shiraz. Do not trouble yourselves. I stand ready. If you want on to Bushir according to your orders and pass this village by, you would accomplish your mission. So the escort takes the Bab back to Shiraz, and they were told to bring the Bab in chains to Shiraz. And he actually had a very lovely journey with them because they loved him very, very much. He was just, the Bab was the kind of person that you would be in his presence for just a few minutes, and then you would just fall in love completely. He, unless you had a really black, dark heart where there's no spot of love left, like all the people who hurt him, normal people would be around him and would be attracted to him like moths to the light at night when you're out standing on your porch. Like, he was irresistible. That's the kind of person the Bab was. He was supposed to enter Shiraz in a really humiliating way. And it was very cute. Also, it was during their journey, Haji Mubarak fed everybody. He made food for everyone. They all ate together. The prisoners with the Bab and Haji Mubarak and the guards, they just ate together and they talked, and they asked the Bab to run away. They said, please, we'll let you off here and you can just run away and be safe. And anyway, so what the poor Hussein Khan, he's a nice guy. He's not bad. He helps the Bab in the end. But he wanted the Bab to come in a really humiliating way. But he entered Shiraz, obviously, like a king. And now we're going to probably be able to do half of part 7 today. So I wanted to do the whole thing, but actually the pilgrimage, I didn't realize there was so much information. So maybe we'll be able to catch up. If not, we may be doing half parts from now until the end of the chronology. So like we'll do one whole part and half of one part, and I'll cut it off at a good time. This one I kind of know when I can cut it off. So now is part 7 in the chronology, the primal point, 1845 to 1846, an extremely momentous year. It is the return of the Bab to Shiraz and his reunion with his mother and wife, and also his interrogation as soon as he arrives on the 7th of July, 1845, Hussein Khan. The family just heard rumors. They're very alarmed. They heard rumors that the Bab was back from pilgrimage, that he was in Shiraz, that he'd been arrested, and his very large family. I mean, he was like, it's like a huge family, so many members of the family and children and aunts and uncles and cousins. And they all heard that that he'd been arrested, but only Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali and his wife Khadija Begum were Babis. The rest of the family, including his mother, was skeptical. Why is he making these pronouncements? Why is he saying he's the Qaim? He is the Sayyid, he is the Sayyid Ali, why is he saying this? So as soon as the Bab arrived in Shiraz, he was brought straight to the citadel, which is this very interesting building. And the governor received him very patronizingly and very disrespectful. He says, do you realize what a great mischief you have kindled? Are you aware what a disgrace you have become to the holy faith of Islam and to the august person of our sovereign, Muhammad Shah? Are you not the man who claims to be the author of a new revelation which annuls the sacred precepts of the Quran? And you have to hand it to him. He's actually on point here. This is exactly what the Bab is saying. Yes, he's saying he's the author of a new revelation, and also it annuls the sacred precepts of the Quran. So good job, Hussein Khan. The Bab's only reply is from chapter 49, verse 6 of the Quran, the Surah Hujurat, the inner apartments. O believers, if an ungodly man comes to you with a tiding, make it clear, lest you afflict a people unwittingly and then repent of what you have done. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure how to interpret this. However, this reply angered Hussein Khan so much that he ordered an attendant to strike the Bab's face, and the Bab was beautiful, perfect face, and his face was hit so violently that his green turban, the sign of his descendants from the Prophet Muhammad, fell to the ground. I do have a feeling, though, even though I don't fully understand the Quranic verse that I just read, that this dynamic of the Bab responding to a question with a verse of the Quran is the most cheeky that the Bab gets, because this is something that he's done in childhood several times to Sheikh Abid. Sheikh Abid would talk to him and the Bab would respond from a verse of the Quran. And it's like, it's that unfailing courtesy. Even when he wants to make clear that he is being firm, instead of being rude, he says a verse from the Quran, which is a holy book revealed by God, you know? So it's like, it was the Bab's way of responding to the rudeness. It is the Bab's most courteous and most respectful way of acknowledging and responding to the rudeness and the insult of the governor of Shiraz. I'm very happy with that. I think that that's what it is. So on the 7th of July, 1845, the very same day, the family intervenes. And now this is the inside of the outside, right? This is the entrance inside the citadel. And this is where the scene that you're about to hear takes place. So in the meantime, Fatima Begum, the mother of the Bab, pleads and pleads and pleads with her brother, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, the uncle of the Bab, and a Babi himself, to save her son. And she's going to do this more than once, guys. The mother of the Bab did maybe not understand at the time the mission of the Bab, but she tried to save him so many times. That is the definition of motherhood, I think. So Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, I probably so worried they were going to kill him, hurries to the citadel and demands that his nephew be released. Hussein Khan, who had just ordered the attendant to slap the Bab so hard his turban fell, agrees to let the Bab go home if Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali promises that it's going to be house arrest and not freedom. No one can meet with the Bab. Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali says, nope, not possible. We come from a very big family. We know everyone in the city. We are merchants that have been here for generations. The most promising young man of our entire family just came back from pilgrimage. You're going to have to give us 3 days so that he can receive people, and then he'll be under house arrest. So Hussein Khan agrees, but he has one condition, is that that a person of recognized standing gives bail and assures that he's not going to try to run away from Shiraz. And so Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali agrees to pay the Bab's bail and becomes his guarantor. And in his own handwriting on the pledge, he affixed his personal seal, and witnesses witness the document. The document is handed to the governor. The governor remands the Bab into the hands of his uncle, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, and on the condition that his uncle will bring him back whenever he is asked to. And the Sheikh Abu Turab, who, if you remember, is the Sheikh who officiated the Bab's wedding to Khadija Begum just 2.5 years ago, he arranges for the Bab. He's so nice. He does such a nice thing for the Bab. He's so thoughtful. He arranges for the Bab to recant his claim to prophethood in front of the entire city at the Vakil Mosque. So nice, so thoughtful. We know how that's going to go, though. So this, I really love this part here. This is the first 3 days of the Bab in Shiraz. Oh, I know why we're not going to be able to finish today, because we chit-chatted until 1:15. No chit-chat tomorrow. Okay, so this is 3 days in July. It's a work of art, digital art that I made to illustrate this. There's about 100 different pieces of art that I made for this chronology. I wanted it to be really sort of new and interesting just for the Bab, because the Bab was so revolutionary. So Khadija Begum and Fatima Begum, the wife and mother of the Bab, are finally reunited with their beloved after a separation of almost a year. The first 3 days of the Bab's return home were, as his uncle had warned Hussein Khan, filled with visits from friends, neighbors, merchants, childhood friends, family, cousins, uncles, aunts, grandmas, probably, I'm assuming. These 3 days were filled with joy for the family and friends and the followers of the Bab, who have finally can bask in reunion with him, since they've been separated from their manifestation of God, their leader for a whole year almost. And during this time, what I read in Haji Mirza Habibullah Afnan's story of Shiraz and Fars that was really interesting, is that during these 3 days that everybody is there and reuniting with the Bab, people who knew him well, people who believe in him, people who didn't know him well, curious people who want to see who's this Chaim, all these people, divine verses kept streaming from the Bab's lips like a continuous rain, which the Bab himself wrote longhand. Oh, actually, it's from right to left. Wrote longhand in large sheets of cashmere paper and offered these holy verses in his own exquisite handwriting to all of the guests who were visiting him. After 3 days, all the visits were denied and no one was allowed to enter the Bab's presence. But the inventive believers still found a way to communicate with him through letter writing. They would lay down on paper their religious question and their request for guidance and yearning for salvation, and the Bab would respond to each according to their capacity. So now is the proclamation of the Bab and the Majidis. Actually, this is what was supposed to be, you know, the sheikh who married the Bab and he organized this thing. This was supposed to be the Bab's recantation in the Masjid Vakil. But this is actually the Bab's proclamation in the Masjid Vakil, because this is what he's going to do. Instead of recanting in front of everybody, he's going to emphasize that he is the promised one. This happens shortly after the Bab's return, but you know what's very interesting, for such an important event in the life of in the history of the faith, we do not know. So I dug on the entire internet, every page of the internet, to find as many images at that time and modern ones of the mosque of Vakil, where the Bab is going to proclaim. So the people are wild with excitement. The governor of Shiraz, Hussein Khan, calls all the inhabitants of the city to gather at the mosque of Vakil on Friday, sometime, okay, I know this is a really wide, okay, so sometime after July 1845, and come, hear the Bab renounce his claim. This is the theme of this Friday's prayers, is going to be the Bab recounting his claim. So from the morning, early morning, to 3 hours before sunset, so all day basically, throngs of people are filling the mosque and overflowing, climbing the roofs, climbing the minarets, and others are pacing in the courtyard. Like you see here, let's pretend like they're pacing in the courtyard and they're waiting for the Bab. The governor, clerics, merchants, and notables are sitting in the mosque near the pulpit. And the pulpit is really cool. It's made out of a single piece of marble and is 14 steps. And they're carved entirely out of a single piece of marble. Suddenly, whispers are running through the crowd. He's coming. The Bab comes through the gate accompanied by his uncle, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, and escorted by 10 guards. He enters the mosque and just from his person exudes this air of just power and dignity. And Sheikh Abu Turab, the one who married him, the leader of the Friday prayers, climbs the 14 steps of the pulpit, carved out of a single piece of marble. You'll see it later, and is getting ready to deliver his Friday sermon. And the Bab addresses Hussein Khan and the clerics. What is your intention in asking me to come here? You know, and this is the manifestation of God knows what they're doing. But also, remember on the boat where the Bab was saying that what the bad people do only really hurts themselves. When a manifestation of God asks a question, they can answer something nice. They don't have to answer something nasty. But whatever they answer, God will judge them on that, and it will hurt them in the end. So he's not asking because he wants to know. He's asking basically because he's giving them a chance to be the better person, and they're gonna completely fail because what they answer is, the intention is that you should ascend this pulpit and repudiate your false claims to this, so that this commotion and unrest will subside. So you see, they have absolutely no vision. They don't think, hey, we have actually been waiting for the Qa'im for 13 centuries. They just think, we just want this noise to stop. It's too much noise in the city. That's how narrow-minded they are. So Sheikh Abu Turab invites the Bab to join him on the famous pulpit. Beautiful pulpit, beautiful picture. Thank you, Wikipedia. It's too bad you have to go to the chronology, people, because the picture's like 3 times that long. This is only the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, first half of the pulpit. The rest of the pulpit is so great. This is the pulpit the Bab climbed. He climbed these stones. It's so great. The Bab moved towards Sheikh Abu Turab and climbed on the first step, which you cannot see yet, but if you go to the chronology, you'll see it, to begin addressing those who are present. Sheikh Abu Turab, the Imam Jumi interrupts him and says, come up higher, come up higher. He's very nice, very nice. The Bab climbs up 2 more steps and begins prefacing what he's intending to say with some introductory remarks. Bab starts, praise be to God, who hath in truth created the heavens and the earth. And then at that exact moment, he's just praised God. At that exact moment, one of the Imam's assistants shouts, enough of this idle chatter, declare now and immediately the thing you intend to say. Sheikh Abu Turab firmly reprimanded the man and put him back in his place. Hold your peace and be ashamed of your impertinence. After, remember, he is wearing a green turban. He is a Sayyid. He is descended from the Prophet Muhammad. That little nut job that yelled at him is not. Turning to the Bab, Sheikh Abu Turab asks him to be brief in order to lessen the crowd's excitement. Don't talk too long, they'll get too happy. Sheikh Hussein, the Bab's enemy, speaks to him very harshly. And he says, go to the top of the pulpit so everyone can see you and hear you. Recant your claim. So the Bab climbs the rest of the steps of the marble pulpit and sat down at the top. Utter silence fell on the crowd, to the point where it seemed the mosque was totally empty and everyone is just waiting for the Bab to start speaking. So part 3, the prayer. The Bab began to recite a prayer in Arabic on divine unity with such eloquence and majesty that the entire congregation, high and low alike, erudite or illiterate, listened attentively, fascinated. His address lasted half an hour. That is important because remember what I told you about what Baha'u'llah said about the hand of God being in the life of the manifestations of God. And how I said that the Bab is so courteous. And this sheikh just told him, speak briefly. And he speaks half an hour. So he's not disobeying and being discourteous. He is being carried by God. Because if the manifestation of God speaks 30 minutes inside a mosque, it is all pretty much, this is the hand of God is working in this situation, really. And the Bab says the condemnation, and he includes this passage, the condemnation of God upon him who regards me either as a representative of the Imam or the gate thereof. The condemnation of God also be on whoever imputes to me the charge of having denied the unity of God, of having repudiated the prophethood of Muhammad, the seal of the prophets, of having rejected the truth of any of the messengers of old, or of having refused to recognize the guardianship of Ali, the commander of the faithful, or any of the imams who have succeeded him. Instead of the Bab's expected recantation, his words to the congregation on that Friday silenced and subdued the hostile crowd and strengthened the faith of his followers. Sheikh Hussein was furious. He turned to Hussein Khan. Sheikh Hussein is the mean guy from the boat. Sheikh Hussein Khan is the governor of Shiraz. Did you bring this seed here in the presence of all these people? There must have been thousands of people there to prove his cause? Or did you bring him to recant and renounce his false claim? He will soon, with these words, win over all these people to his side. Tell him to say what he has come to say. What are all these idle tales? So the Hussein Khan says, but to the Bab, please say what you came here to say. So this is part 4, the public proclamation. I mean, honestly, they asked for it. They asked the Bab to come to speak to the entire city at a mosque, and then they asked him to stand on the top of the pulpit. And they think that he's going to recant. So the Bab fell silent for a moment and said, well, okay, this is what I came here to say. Oh, people, know this well, that I speak what my grandfather, the messenger of God, spoke 1260 years ago, and who do not speak what my grandfather did not. What Muhammad made lawful remains lawful until the day of resurrection, and what he forbade remains forbidden unto the day of resurrection. And according to the tradition that has come down from the Imams, whenever the Qiyam arises, that will be the day of resurrection. So the Bab embraces Sheikh Abu Turab, who I'm assuming is completely shocked. They embraces him, and he comes down from the pulpit. Sheikh Hussein, the tyrant, they should have thrown him off the ship, if you ask me, but no one's asking. So anyway, he, as the Bab is walking by, he tries to hit him with his stick, and someone steps in and gets hidden instead. Saves the Bab, protects the Bab. The Bab is getting ready to join them with the Friday prayer, but Sheikh Abu Turab, fearing the Bab's life could be in danger after the crowd dispersed. He's very nice, like he said, come and recant. I'll reserve the mosque for you to recant. And then he says, oh, come up the steps. And then the Bab embraces him, and he embraces him back. And he really likes the Bab. He married the Bab. He likes the Bab. He's fine. He said, no. Why don't you just not pray with us today? Well, I think your family wants to see you. That's very nice. It's not true. It's not true. But what he says is basically this. Your family is anxious and awaiting your return. All are apprehensive lest any harm befall you. Repair to your house and thereafter offer your prayer there. Of greater merit shall this deed be in the sight of God. Because, maybe if he stayed, there would be a commotion. And I'm going to just stop here because you want to know what happens after this, and I'm going to tell you tomorrow.
So thank you so much, Violetta. We actually have a couple more minutes, so we could do some quick questions before we close out.
Absolutely, let's do that.
But a special note is I put all the links to our signups for each of these projects.
Okay, great.
Below, so it's very important that everyone who's been joining us, that they go and sign up there just so that they can stay informed, because this is just the first of many talks that we're going to be giving over the summer, as a collaborative.
Sounds good.
All right.
Sounds good. I'm just, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just looking at what's in the chat.
Why do people have such a different idea of what the day of resurrection is from what we are told?
I don't know. And I don't want you to go any further because I don't have any clue. And I don't know. And I'm scared because I don't have the answer. So I don't want to sound even more ignorant. People are crazy. Joseph, people don't stick with the word of God, I'm just going to say the only thing I can say for sure is this, is if you read about the day of resurrection in the writings of the Bab, and the writings of Baha'u'llah, and the writings of Abdul Baha, and in the writings of Shoghi Effendi, you're going to get a pretty unified view of the day of resurrection. And if you start looking at the resurrection outside of that little safe place where the covenant is protecting all of that, you're going to get some crazy stuff. I caught it just in time. Yeah. Day of resurrection is the most important thing, Joseph. It really is. It really is. And it's It's not okay that there are so many ideas about it, because it gets very confusing. Because I think actually, you know what? I do know the answer. Hold on just 1 second. Okay, great.
We have a question from John Harkness.
No, I know, but I know this day of resurrection thing. It just came to me.
Oh, sorry.
The day of resurrection is like, what's like the biggest treasure that's never been found? Like the Holy Grail, right? The Holy Grail, so important. Indiana Jones, man. He goes for the Holy Grail. If Indiana Jones goes after it, means it's really something. No, yes, this is important, because the day of resurrection is like the Holy Grail, and all the religious leaders in the world are like Indiana Jones. They all want to use the Holy Grail to make a point to control their congregations. If you do this, this is going to happen, because the day of resurrection is this. Well, no, the day of resurrection is this, and you can only do this if you wear these types of clothes. The day of resurrection, only certain people who are called will come. And if in order for you to be called, you have to not eat this and you have to not drink this, and the thing is, what people didn't understand is that the day of resurrection is the day of resurrection of religion, not the day of resurrection of people. So there's no need to have conditions, because it's not something that you're going to get like a lottery ticket or a train ticket or a plane ticket. You're going to get to that right destination. The day of resurrection is independent of destination. The day of resurrection is a renewal of religion. It is something that has always been there almost, it's, and so that's why the day of resurrection is so, is such a draw for people, because they want to go to heaven. They don't want to. Yeah. Okay. Mom says do research and stop talking. Okay. So I'm going to do that, because I usually listen to my mom. What's the question from John Harkness?
Well, I just, my minister was ordained from Harvard University congregation.
Oh, wow.
And United Church of Christ. And he had the Baha'i belief.
Uh-huh.
That it was spiritual for the world, as you say. If Christ's body appeared before the disciples, well, that's important, but that only lasted 20 minutes, so doesn't matter really. But my minister figured this out. It was easy for me when I became Baha'i, because it's spiritual.
Yeah,
and it's Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
So not all Christians are fundamentalist or literalist, but the fundamentalists kind of take over the airwaves with this.
Yes.
And it's a way to, Islam, Buddhism, all of these can use these fundamentals to block the new revelation. Well, that's Buddhist enough. That's not, Krishna wouldn't have done that. And the Bob was wrong. He interpreted the highest clerics, Grand Vizier.
Yeah.
No, they use it to block.
Yeah. I was really hesitant of reading that little bit when the Bab approaches Medina and Nabil tells, he's thinking this, he's thinking that, he's thinking this, he's thinking that. I was uncomfortable of doing that, because we Baha'is don't do that generally. Now, the reason it was included by I'm sure by Shoghi Effendi, because Shoghi Effendi knew who had told Nabil this. And Nabil, he was really smart. He talked to everyone. He talked to so many people. And so he trusted the information, Probably maybe Haji Mubarak or Qudus, because they were the only two that were there. So I'm assuming that's the reason that's in the book. But the reason that Baha'is never do this, they never say, Baha'u'llah doesn't want you to do this. Baha'u'llah thinks that this, Baha'u'llah thinks that that. You know what? We cannot actually do that because we actually have the writings of Baha'u'llah. He tells us what he thinks. So we can't go and like put thoughts in his head and put words in his mouth because he gave us so many words. And the reason that fundamentalist Christians are so and Muslims are so good with that is because they don't have as much of like clear words of Baha'u'llah. Look at like, for example, just the hidden words. That entire spiritual, mystical volume is filled with God saying, "Oh, son of man, do this, do that, do this, do that. I don't like this. I don't like that. Do this. This is not what I like. This is," so we don't even need to know what Baha'u'llah thinks because we have the hidden words. We know exactly what he thinks. And when religions don't have that, they compensate. And they compensate by thinking they know what the prophet knows and saying, well, what would Jesus do? Like that, what would Baha'u'llah do? We don't need to, we have all these biographies of Baha'u'llah. We know what he did. When he left Baghdad, he had this woman every single day. She would say hi to him and he would put his head down so she could kiss her because she must have been like 3 feet tall because, he was like 5'2" or 5'3", and she was too short to get to his face. So I'm calculating, I think she was like 4 foot 4'1" or something. And so every day this manifestation of God would bend down and let a Baghdadi woman kiss his cheek. And every day he'd ask her how she's doing. And every day he'd give her a little coin. And he left Baghdad because he was kicked out of this place that he had chosen. He liked Baghdad. Baghdad never again spent time with people. Baha'u'llah never again spent time with people after Baghdad. He loved the people of Baghdad. He chose that destination. And when they exiled him, Baha'u'llah arranged for this woman to have her rent paid for the rest of her life. So we know what would Baha'u'llah do. He would do that. We know what Abdul Baha would do. He would do what he did, He would go into people's houses, say hi, look around quickly, then he would leave, then repairman would come to fix the hole in the roof. He never went to visit someone who was dirty because they hadn't showered in a month, and he washed them and washed their feet, and he never came with a declaration card. He just did it. That's why you have 10,000 people at his funeral. So one of the greatest claims for the Baha'i faith is that we never need to say, what would Abdul Baha do? What would Baha'u'llah do? Because all we have to do is look at history. And that's why I'm so fundamentalist when it comes to history, because I think Baha'i history can recreate a person. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for the questions. We really appreciate it. And more importantly, it's really a scintillating discussion when people bring all their new perspectives, their thoughts, questions. Of course, questions are a virtue. It's important to ask questions. So we thank everyone who brings questions. Violetta is going to try to make available to everyone who's provided their email all the times that she's speaking to help people to come to these presentations. So please provide your contact information. We share with Violetta as well.
Yep.
You're welcome, please, to share this with your friends. But more importantly, remember, we're having this tomorrow. Tomorrow on Friday, the 21st, it'll be our last session on this series on the turning point. We think all
John,
Yes,
I think we've been reporting something that is actually not accurate. I believe that she is continuing on the Bab the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of August.
Yeah.
C'est vrai, right?
Yeah, c'est vrai. Sinon, j'aurais pas fini.
Yeah. So this is why she doesn't have to race to the finish line tomorrow.
Well, I mean, parts 10, 11, and 12 are really long.
Yeah,
So
I'm sure.
I'm sure I'll get it done. I want to just ask, while I have you guys, I want to ask you, do you mind if I shorten certain things? Because you're going to get the links to everything afterwards, but do you mind if I shorten, like, for example, the tablets? Because I have a lot of tablets. I'm going to just kind of give you the cliff notes. And
not at all.
Yeah, okay. Because otherwise I'm not going to get it done. I think I spent
That's
a lot
fine. We want
today.
you to feel that you are
Yeah.
accomplishing what you set
Yeah.
out to do. That's
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, if you want to come back and talk about the Bob later this year, I'm
Yeah.
putting you on the schedule.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I
we're
think-
always welcome to do more.
actually,
Always
You
welcome.
know, I think actually later this year, I think there's a couple of things I would want to do. I really want to talk about Baha'u'llah in Baghdad, how he recreated the community of Baghdad and how he loved the people of Baghdad. And he was never again that way ever again. He loved the people of Iraq. That's one thing I want to do. And then I have a really moving talk on Yazd, why Yazd is important. And I'd also like to do the 2-part Tahirih talk that I did and the 2-part Mirza Abul Fazl talk that I did. And
Okay,
the 2-part
you got
Haji
it.
Mirza Haidar Ali talk that I did, because those are really, those people are really important. They're very, very, very important to our life as Baha'is. And the story of the Baha'is of Yazd, honestly, the story of the Baha'is of Yazd is the only thing you ever need to hear if you want to understand why the Persians at the beginning of the faith were the way they were, and why people like Haji Mirza Haidar Ali and Mirza Abul Fazl were the way they were and were so loved. You have to Tahirih and Yazd, that's so important. And then Baghdad, because it's a story of love. It's a story of love between Baha'u'llah and Iraq, because Baha'u'llah decided to go to Iraq. You know, they wanted to send him to Russia, but he said, no, I want to go to Iraq. I want to go to Baghdad. And then the other places that Baha'u'llah was banished, he never chose. And they were imposed on him, and they were unfair. They were unfair exiles. The only fair exile was the exile from Persia to Baghdad for 2 reasons. One is because, yes, Baha'u'llah could not stay in Iran because an attempt had been made on the life of the Shah. Baha'u'llah understood that. They couldn't kill him because he was the son of a former minister. And he said, no, I understand. I have to leave because of this, because I'm the most well-known Babi now. I know I have to leave. They said, well, go to Russia. He's like, no, I want to go to Baghdad. So it's fair because they let him go where he wanted to go. They gave him letters of invitation, and because he needed to not be in Persia anymore for his own safety also, right? But then the other 2, they were engineered by these. What is the most polite word for someone really awful? What is like,
Demonic.
yeah, evil
Demonic.
and
That's what they were.
evil and demonic people of
Yeah.
What is it called? Persia. They were collaborating and talking between like Istanbul and Baghdad and Tehran. Let's get him exiled again. Let's get him exiled again. And then they came right in the middle of the festival of Rizvan and really rudely and that is one of the things that hurts the manifestations of God the most, is when people are so rude to them, because, you know, they make a really big deal about courtesy. Courtesy is one of God's most beloved qualities. And you see when the Bab is like cutting someone and answering, he's never even rude because he's quoting the Quran, you know, so it's impossible to be rude by doing that. And the things that hurt Baha'u'llah the most were these moments, these times when people were so they treated him like a pack animal. When they send the Holy Family to Edirne, they stuff them in wagons, like pieces, like bushels of wheat. It was 273 kilometers. That's like 100 and something miles. And they all almost died. It was the shortest of all their exiles. And they all almost died. That's how, and then they put Baha'u'llah in a prison where the water was rotten. Anybody who drank it, they got cholera, they got malaria. Everybody almost died from the water. You know, it's like, and you're doing this to people, sure, okay, they're causing problems, yes. This is a new religion, okay, it's a huge problem. They have a lot of followers, yes, that's bad. But do you have to treat them like animals? Like, the lack of humanity is the thing that hurt people the most. That hurt Baha'u'llah and the Bab and Abdul Baha the most. The lack of humanity, the lack of courtesy, because you can even treat your enemies with courtesy, and they should have treated them with courtesy. That's how it should have been done. But that is why they came, and that is why they suffered, and that is why they bore chains, so that now we have these standards Now we know literally what Jesus would do because Baha'u'llah has told us. You know, what would Jesus do? The answer to that question is what Baha'u'llah said.
Well, thank you so much for everything you said, Violetta. We really appreciated it. It's so important that you're able to join us here today.
Oh,
So
important, I don't know. I mean, we're all having
well,
fun.
the thing is, we're going through something that all of us need to really work to become aware of, and we're doing our effort together. And the fact that you've put such heart and soul into this, it means a lot, and we really appreciate
No, actually,
it.
you know, I want to
Thank
say
you.
one thing. It's very, very short. I just want to say, because, you know, we started 15 minutes late, so I'm okay. I'm okay. I just wanted to say one thing is that Shoghi Effendi told us over and over again that Baha'i history is transformative. And the reason that I do these things is not to get exposure. It's because this stuff was all written by other people, not me. I am just kind of like a compiler, and I happen to have been born with an extraordinary amount of energy. That's the only thing that I'm bringing to the table. And Baha'i history is transformative. And so what we're doing with Firm Foundation Academy and Clearwater, Florida is and me and all the speakers that are coming here is we're trying to start conversations about things that matter. And we're trying to ask questions as the talks are going. And we're trying to have an experience that makes us feel happy and makes us want to share, but really brings us joy and makes us fall in love with the faith over again. That's our goal. And I am just a tool, you know, a transmission tool. But all of this is Baha'i history. This is what the covenant does. This is not what Violetta does. This is what the covenant does. And I am just showing you what the covenant is doing. I'm done.
Well, we thank you all. Thank you for joining us. We'll be seeing each other tomorrow, and
Yes.
we'll be updated by Violetta on the next sessions on the Turning Point. And we appreciate your time.